In this video, I'm going to talk about the new 40k 9th edition Crusade mission pack, Beyond the Veil, and whether it's something you want or not. It's gotten a little bit cooler up here, thankfully, and my hair has not gotten any less unruly. It hasn't gotten any rulier. Fez. So I received this mission pack booklet a couple weeks ago, I think, and I was going to make a video about it last week, and I couldn't. Anyway, not important, but now I am. And I also had a little bit more time to go look through it and try to figure things out a little bit and try to figure out whether this is something that you want or not. And it kind of depends a little bit on what you're looking for. If you're looking for story, there's about 3 pages and a map. That's the entirety of the story here to this. You got an introduction. You have the Pariah Nexus. This is the whole kind of shoot and match. This is what the whole thing is about. And it's this area that sort of the Necrons kind of control. They sort of built it. It's hard to tell. And it's basically, it's a place that humans don't like to go because it's like a giant null area psychically, and it's a whole thing. And anyway, but yeah, this entire campaign mission pack here for Crusade deals with that area. And there's, like I said, 1, 2, there's 3, and then there's a map. And then you get into the rules, I believe. Well, yeah, here's the Beyond the Veil games, and that gets into the rules. So for those of you who are relatively new, a campaign is when you play a series of games, and usually something that happens in the first game, whether this person wins or that person wins, then has some sort of effect in the next game, and then the next game, and then you have X amount of games. Maybe it's 5 games, maybe it's first to 10 campaign points, whatever the deal might be. And campaigns have been around for a very long time, and lots of different games handle them different ways. The thing that's very interesting to me about Crusade, and also about this rule set, is that it's taking an army-style game, Warhammer 40,000. We have squads and squads of little tiny people, or robots, or whatever, and you are fighting against someone else who also has an army of, squads. And it's taking those and it's using the campaign rules that we're used to in many skirmish games. Now, there's been campaigns of regular army-size 40k for a long time, and since 8th, there's been 3 main ways to play, according to Games Workshop, the game of Warhammer 40,000. You've got yourself open, which is basically just all bets off, use whatever models you want, have a good time, throw some dice, And then there's also matched play, which is this is more for competition. We're following very specific rules. You have to build your armies very specific ways. You have a certain point value you have to hit, blah, blah, that kind of thing. In between, there's always been narrative. And narrative is sort of like kind of come up with a story and do some stuff, maybe link some campaigns together. And in 8th edition, I don't know that a ton of people played narrative. It's not something you go to an event usually to play. Normally, if you go to an event, like a convention or whatever, or a tournament, it's a competition. That's the whole point. There may be some narrative sort of little kind of offshoots here and there at the bigger conventions, and that's cool. Generally, a lot of times, narratives are either something you play with friends of yours at your local shop, or friends of yours who come over and play in your game room or your basement, or whatever it is you have that you do that. Maybe you alternate. This weekend, we're going to play at Bob's, and next weekend, we're going to play at Shelley's. And, however that works. And that's what the campaign thing has always generally been for Warhammer 40,000. There have been big campaign settings in the past that GW put out. There have been fan-made ones that different websites have put out. There's a lot to it. But generally, it's been a little bit of like, well, you won, so therefore this happens next time. Or you lost, and this, that kind of thing. And skirmish game campaigns are a good deal different. So games like, just for examples, Necromunda, Mordheim, Warcry, to get into something new, Kill Team, also something new, although Warcry is probably the newest. Those games, because you are not moving around squads of figures, you're moving around an army, or you're moving around a small squad, and each person moves individually, you generally, at the end of the game, go through person by person to find out, well, what happened in this game to that person? Well, this person got knocked out of action. So therefore, you have to roll on a chart to see, did they die? Or did they get better, but not all the way better? They got a bum leg now. Or did nothing happen to them? They got healthy really quick, or that kind of stuff. And you go and you do that. If somebody on a team, a figure has killed, let's say, another opponent, or maybe a couple of opponents, do they get some sort of level boost? Do they level up? Like in a a Dungeons and Dragons style tabletop game, or maybe even something like a video game. That kind of concept has been around for also a long time amongst skirmish games, but I've never really seen it used when it's time to play with big army games, because going through on each model would take forever to figure out, well, this guy kind of got knocked out. What happened to him? Roll. Okay, write that down. And so the Crusade system is designed to kind of go more along the lines of, like, you've got characters who have their own card that kind of keeps track of them over the course of the campaign. And you have also cards for specific units. So a unit can take kind of like damage in the next one, or they can be kind of like their morale can be crappy, like their leadership drops. And there's all kinds of different things that can happen in this new Crusade system. So it's a little bit like role-playing. There's no, you're not having to use funny voices or do any of the things that role players have a tendency to kind of do. Like, well, then I talk to the, tavern keeper and I say, I would like to, that, none of that kind of stuff. It's not like that if you're concerned. If you like role-playing games, don't get me wrong. That's how I got into nerd games, was D&D in the 5th grade. So don't get me wrong. I'm just saying for people who are like, well, I don't want to play 40k and have to make funny voices or talk to a DM. And it's not like that when I say it's kind of like that, like, Dungeons and Dragons. It's actually more like a role-playing game in a video game, where, yeah, you've got choices and you might say different things to people, and you've played those kind of games if you've played video games, and actually a lot of those choices don't barely ever matter. What really matters long-term in the game is you get experience points and stats, and you get to level up and put points into this skill or put points into this stat or do all kinds of things, and that kind of building up over time is what makes, like, video game type RPGs. They're not the same, obviously, as your tabletop Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of stuff, but they do share some similarities. And now 40k with the Crusade system kind of shares some similarities as well. So from what I understand, this is the very first of the packs. This is Beyond the Veil, Warhammer Crusade, and it's obviously all about the Necrons and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, there's a little bit of fluff, a little bit of story at the beginning, and then we start getting into this is how you start playing. Now, a lot of this is mimicked in the current 9th edition book, but this is now kind of like taking that same style and adding things to it to make it a different experience for you and the players who are playing within this kind of campaign. So you're starting out with stuff like select battle size, and of course you get your combat patrols, your incursions, your strike force, and your onslaught. So, but they're generally basing everything based off of power points as opposed to the normal like regular points, power rating or whatever. So then you've got, and the thing that's cool about this is that there are 24 different missions in here, because there's 6 missions for each of the 4 sizes of games, which I think is very cool. So it gives you a lot in that sometimes you buy these books and there's like 2 missions for each size, or maybe there's only 4 missions for the whole thing. And so I kind of liked that. That was very cool. But it goes through step by step. First do this, then read mission briefing, then determine theater of war effects, because things can be going on, in the actual environment and stuff like that. And you create the battlefield, you select your agendas. It's all the normal stuff that you have when you're doing the same kind of thing through the Crusade section in the big 9th book here. But it also then gets into a lot of information that is very specific just to this setting. So you can get into your agendas here, and they have very specific agendas depending on this particular setting. So it makes the agendas different than the ones that are here in the big 9th book. And then you get into Warpcraft, and you get into the battle traits. So you can win a battle trait at the end of a game. If this particular unit can get a battle trait. When a unit gains a battle trait after a battle set in the Pariah Nexus, you can use one of the tables below. So then you have different tables for different battle traits, depending on if it's a vehicle, excluding vehicles and monsters, whether it's a monster or whether it's a character. So you have all these different things that you can do. Sometimes you get a set of 3, but a lot of times it's one different thing. And they're different than the ones that are in the 9th edition book. You've got relics, so it's the same kind of deal along those lines. Battle scars, investigating the Pariah Nexus gets you into finding kind of like, it's almost like looking for power-ups, kind of. Yeah, not really, but it's along those lines. And you have all these different things that you can do within your particular campaign, kind of following along these rules. It's a little bit like, again, going back to tabletop RPGs, you've got your 5th edition is the current edition for Dungeons & Dragons. You get your 5th edition main player's handbook that explains how to play in the game and all that kind of stuff. But you know, there are also settings that you can play. There's a setting that's sort of inherent to the game, and inherent to, you know, the D&D book. But then there's also stuff like, and some of these are old, and I don't even know if they're around anymore, but there's Forgotten Realms, there's Eberron, there's, I was going to say Grey Skull, but that's not right, Grey Hawk, Dark Suns, like all these different settings. Now, this is different in that we're not making a different setting for 40K. The Emperor's still the Emperor, and Orcs are still Orcs, and Tau are still Tau, and all that kind of stuff. It's just that these are different, kind of like theaters of war. This is something that's happening in a region, and it's giving you campaign stuff to play, which is, I think, really cool. But you get into all kinds of different, you know, afflictions. So there's both perks and nerfs to some degree, and then we get into the missions. And so, like I said, there's 6 for combat patrol, 6 for the incursion, 6 for strike force. Am I remembering that properly? Incursion, strike force, and then onslaught. So it's a lot of different missions with information, all kinds of stuff. You got your, you know, here's your deployment map and all that jazz. And it's really kind of nice that way. There's a lot to this that can really, if you're into the narrative play, and if you're really interested in Crusade, or if you've already been playing some Crusade, even though we're, you know, in a pandemic, but you've got some friends or family that you're safe with, and you've been doing this for a while, and you've maybe gotten this book, you've used up all the Crusade that's in here, which is not possible technically, because you can always, you're kind of making up your own stuff here. Here, you don't have to make stuff up. Here you got to, you know, you can follow along. Again, going back to tabletop RPGs, when you are playing Dungeons and Dragons with someone who's made up their entire own world as a GM, a DM, whatever, Dungeon Master, Game Master, that's pretty cool and it's nice, unless they're kind of bad at it. Then it's a sort of a bummer for the players, depending, you know what I mean? But there are other people who are like, I would make up my own stuff, only I'm not confident in doing so, or I'm concerned that I'm not going to do it right or whatever. And so they go out and they grab very frequently one of those books with a setting like Forgotten Realms or Eberron or any of those other ones, and they start using that. Or maybe they just really love that storyline and they don't want to reinvent the wheel. This is the same deal. We're not having to reinvent the wheel here and come up with all the stuff that's in the normal, you know, Crusade section in here. We've got new stuff, and we don't have to kind of customize and make our own things. Now, here's the weird thing about this book. Right here, basic rules. Now, what's interesting to me is as I was flipping through this book, I got to the basic rules section, and I'm like, well, we've gotten almost, we're 2/3 of the way through this 111 or whatever page book, and now we're to the basic rules? That's weird. And then I started to realize that these basic rules are the basic rules from the big book. These are explaining to you the battlefield, here's all your bullet points, just like in the regular book, the dice, the roll-offs, and this is the rules for 40K, and it's in here. Now, initially I was like, oh, cool, they just slipped in that like little 12-page book or whatever, that little PDF you can download. But this starts on page 73 and goes to page 111 at the end of the glossary. This is kind of the majority, like here's the stuff about common terrain features, terrain traits, strategic reserves, stratagems. Like, this is an astounding amount of information in here. So then my thought, this is where my head went at, is like, okay, this is very interesting. You buy this book, right? And then you buy a codex. Naturally, you'd have to buy a codex, God forbid. So you buy a codex for whatever army you like, and you buy this book. And now you don't have to buy this big honkin' giant book if you just want to play Crusade. If you just want to play Crusade and you want to, you and your friends just want to play Crusade, you buy a codex, your friend buys a codex, whatever, you buy this book, and now you're ready to go because it's got all the 40K rules in there, so you're set. And it's a really kind of nice way to get people into the hobby via the whole kind of like RPG aspect of it and all that. And then I was looking at the back of this book, and it says, this mission pack does not reprint the rules for creating a Crusade army or gaining battle honors from your games. As a result, you will need a copy of the Warhammer 40,000 core book to play the missions in this battle or mission pack. So you still need this big honkin' book to be able to use this, is what it says on the back. But they've put nearly everything, not nearly everything that's in this book, obviously, but nearly everything in the basic rules that is in this, they've put it in here as, I guess, a reprint, maybe a filler. I mean, if you take a look at it, like I said, literally it's 1/3 of the book. And so maybe they were just like, well, when they got done, they were like, well, it's kind of skinny. You know what I mean? Like if you just take this much of the book, this is the new stuff that comes with Crusade, and this whole section here is all the extra stuff that is basically just already in the 9th core book. So I don't know why this is here. It's confusing to me. And like I said, I initially thought it was because they were, again, making another kind of vector to get into the game, because they've been doing that over the last 5 years. Everything that they make, new Kill Team, Warcry, Shadespire, all this stuff is designed to help you get into the hobby. And I thought that's what they were doing with this, and it doesn't seem like they were. So it's still good. I do really love this, spiral bound thing, because it just lays flat. It's really nice that way. I will give you that. Don't get me wrong. And has a cool strap, like one of those moleskin, whatever they're called. Those little notebooks that you carry and you write your stuff in or whatever. So it's kind of nice that way. And like I said, good information in here, all that kind of stuff. A bit confused why they not completely, but they reprinted a huge swath of the rules in this book. If you still need this book, I'm kind of confused by that. So if you're interested in the more narrative stuff, specifically Crusade, if you really love the concept of powering up your units, powering up your vehicles, powering up your characters. And sometimes it's not even a power up. Sometimes maybe all of a sudden, now this guy's got a bum leg because he got beat up real bad in the last game. And so the next game he's going to be a little bit less effective, and all these different types of things. If you're into that, then this is a good book to pick up to add to the normal Crusade stuff that's in here. But just understand that if you're just now getting into 40k, this and a codex won't do the job. You still will also need the big honking book as well. So, keep track of that and see what you like, because I like the fact that they're going to be hopefully releasing more of these down the road. And again, they're not something that's a necessity. It's not one of those things where you're like, especially like if you're a competitive player, I know a lot of competitive players are always like, I need to buy all this stuff so that I can have access to everything. These are like a complete left turn from that. This is just for your Crusade folks. So if you're not into Crusade, then this is not something you're interested in. But if you're interested in the narrative Crusade style, I'd take a look at this, definitely.